Good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of It's a Football Thing. I'm your host, RJ, and I'm representing the IFT crew here for a special of It's a Chelsea Thing. It's the monthly breakdown, and I couldn't think of anybody else better to do it with than my main man and the well-known and well-liked Chelsea fanatic and enthusiast, Patrick Larson. Thanks for your time. How are you, my man?
I'm doing well, my man. How are you?
Oh, doing well. Like I said, 7:30 in the morning, getting ready for another blockbuster week. Unfortunately, we haven't had the opportunity to watch Chelsea play over the last few days due to the international break, which I know we're at the end of the UEFA Nations League final between Spain and France. As it stands, it's France winning 2-1 with about 3-4 minutes to go. But aside from that, happy to talk Chelsea with you.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to it. I got a little bit of a Chelsea taste this morning watching the Chelsea women play and kind of hold out to get 3 points for them. So that was good. So it's always good to have a little bit of Chelsea in the weekend. But now we're looking forward to talking some Chelsea men with you, and let's get to it.
Let's get to it. And for those who are new to the show, if you wouldn't mind, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps us reach a wider audience. Scott, our other co-host, and Rob, my United brother from another mother, we like to do our shows on a weekly basis to talk the week that was and the week that will be in the Premier League for the most part. And we also delve on other hot topics across Europe. But for the segment during this episode, it's to really take a step back, because I also do a bit of writing for the Chelsea Social and talk Chelsea. And a thing that I like to do is dissect and analyze things, probably because it's part of my day job, but it's really just to get past the week-to-week grind and take a bit of a longer window and see the month that was rather than the week that was, and look a little bit down the road. Because if you're a Chelsea fan at the moment, you're pretty happy where things are going at the moment, it's safe to say. Despite not playing our best, to be positioned at the top of the ladder, it's pretty hard to argue that we're not going pretty well. So for us, today's episode, or tonight, wherever you're residing, it's really going through the September performances, talking about the players and giving a bit of an outlook as to where we think they're heading, going through the next set of fixtures coming up for October, and to talk a little bit about the Ballon d'Or candidates from Chelsea Football Club, because we're well stacked in both categories and all things are blue at the moment. But before we get into it, again, smash that like button. Just want to acknowledge a couple of the champions in the live chat. We've got Claudio here. Thank you, my man. We're going to get you on for a show one day. We've got my cousin from Sydney, another fellow blue. Pat, I've got to get you to meet him someday. Anthony. We've got, unfortunately, there's always one Gooner fan around, Scott. We'll give him some stick when we get back on air again on Tuesday. And Nick from That Chelsea Pod. Just as a little bit of a backstory, I was listening to Nick and his partner Jack there, and they had Adam Newson on from Football London. And I was using them to help me get through my 10K walk I did yesterday. And what an episode. It was fantastic. It had everything I needed just to listen to them talk about everything from players to those out on loan to what they thought about what was happening in the space of the next couple of games coming up. They just really unpacked everything. So go check these guys out, because they're always smashing it out of the ballpark. But Pat, September, let's do a quick recap. The results were Chelsea 3-0, Lukaku got a double, Kovacic rounded it off. Chelsea beat Zenit 1-0 with Lukaku getting the solitary winner. Chelsea 3-0 against Spurs. As you will recall, that was a hot second half. Chelsea 1-1 with Villa in the Carabao Cup, but Keppa the hero to save the day, and we won 5-4 on penalties. Chelsea suffered their first defeat at the hands of the reigning Premier League champions Manchester City, 1-0. Which was, a pretty underwhelming goal, it must be said. Jesus' deflection was just one of those days, unfortunately. The second of the losses, which came back-to-back again, unfortunately, to another heavyweight team in Juventus in Torino, 1-0 via my fellow Italian Federico Chiesa. What a hot prospect he is. And then, fortunately for us, we rounded out the fixtures before the international break with a pretty pleasing performance, it must be said, via that 3-1 win against Southampton. So, Pat, this is the segment where I want to get your thoughts on to really help us dissect, based on those set of performances, what were some of the key things that really stood out from you if you're taking that macro view?
I would say that one of the biggest things was actually just how really in the large majority of the games this month, I didn't really think that we really got to our best performance. One theme was that, certainly like against the likes of Tottenham, against the likes of Villa, we had really, really poor first half performances, but then Thomas Tuchel would make a tactical tweak at halftime, whether that's bringing somebody off, like we all remember the Mason Mount halftime substitution, or just a twist in the formation, that some kind of move by Thomas Tuchel would allow us to have better second half performances. And yes, it comes down to the players on the field, on the pitch, but I think that the fact that we were having to rely on second half performances to get 3 points in some of these fixtures, that was certainly a theme. And then, I think throughout it, we had almost all the games, we had pretty poor first half performances. And then in the losses, we didn't really ever turn it around in the second half. The tactical switches didn't work, like against the likes of City, against the likes of Juventus. You could say like the likes of, the game against Juventus, that they put in a very good defensive performance.
It was a bit concerning, wasn't it? I just want to jump in there quickly, Pat, because I was thinking from the City performance, you thought, okay, sometimes you need to take your hat off to a superior opposition that they were on the day, despite their lucky goal, as we agreed. The reality was they really earned their victory because they played well. They were I've never seen them be as aggressive both on and off the ball, and in the end were deserved winners. But what we were all expecting / hoping for was a much more improved and energetic display against Juventus. And I think the thing that gave me the most concern was the fact that City and Juventus have completely contrasting styles of play, yet we struggled to find a solution for either. So both ends of the spectrum, but we were positioned squarely in the middle and as the whole square peg, round hole conundrum. But I just wanted to draw that out, but I think you had a couple of other things you were going to mention.
Yeah. I think the fact that and I see here the Blue Lounge, shout out to Blue Lounge, the upcoming month is going to be favorable. And I know we're going to get into the October fixtures and whatnot, but I think, I sounded a bit negative talking about some of our performances, and it comes from a place of knowing what we can do. But I think the fact that we're sitting top of the table, despite everything that's happened over the course of the month, that we're still number one, we're top of the table in the league, and that we're still in a decent position in the, in our Champions League group, because we did get that win against Zenit. And I think that it's going to be, I think this favorable run of fixtures is going to, number one, it's going to test us, but because, these are the very types of games that we need to win. But
absolutely.
But the fact that we open up against, a very tricky away fixture at Brentford, after the international break, that's going to be a real test. But I think the fact that we have a number 9, like Romelu Lukaku, is going to, play a big part in what we do. And I think just the positive of all this is that despite everything that's happened, and despite, certain people probably in the fan base getting really, really concerned about the loss to City, the loss to Juventus, we're still top of the table. There's still a lot of great days ahead. And, we support the best team in England.
Absolutely. Well said. For me, I agree with your themes. I also had a couple more when I was dissecting those performances, just trying to see if we can get some commonalities or things that stood out. And you look at the scores and the results that I recapped previously, and I think for us, from the positive side of things, it's good to see that at least our defence continues to be robust, it continues to be well organised, and despite those 1-0 losses against Manchester City and Juventus, when you look at it on face value, losing 1-0 to both of those teams and not playing your best isn't the worst thing in the world. But overall, we're going to be a tough nut to crack. And I think that's one positive that I'm taking out of it. Also, I've noticed that this time around, we have we've been able to score with a lot more ease, I'd say, even though our chance creation is still not where I'd like it to be. When you compare this stage of the season, where we were since Thomas Tuchel took over at the second half of last season, you'll probably recall, Pat, one of the things we struggled to do was score more than 2 goals in a match. And it was something that we had to really rely on our great defence to help bail us out. But as I recapped before, 3-0 against Tottenham, 3-0 against Villa, 3-1 against Southampton. So the fact that we're scoring more than 2 goals a game is another good positive for us. And the diversity of goal scorers as well. So we're not just a one-trick pony, because I'm concerned that we bought Lukaku, and if he was not to be in form, which I know that's a separate discussion point, then there's also a big question mark of where the goals come from. But the fact you've got the likes of Chilwell, Kovacic, Timo Werner now starting to get a few goals on the sheet, Kante, Rudiger, Silva, all against Tottenham, that diversity is going to help us in the latter stages of the season, I believe, because everybody's got to chip in. It's just hopefully our front three can get some more cohesion and start to fire on all cylinders. But also the squad depth, for me, that's the really big positive. We've seen some real emerging shining lights with the likes of Ruben Loftus-Cheek coming back, and what a story that is to see him, someone that we all had an affinity towards, but thought, is this someone that's going to ultimately make it in this star-studded squad, and the injuries he's had, etc. So the fact that he's now coming back in and not just eased his way back into it, but he's looking someone that doesn't look out of place. And for me, I think if he continues on his trajectory, he's going to get a lot more minutes than what people might have suspected. So, yeah, a few good things to come out of it, I'd say. But I just want to now pivot the conversation to the next part, which is just to go through the list of our players and just give a quick assessment. It's completely arbitrary and subjective, and 1 to 10, 1 being not so sensational, 10 being unbelievable, and just giving a bit of an outlook. So outlook positive, meaning going upwards, not so great downwards, and steady is nice and stable. So first and foremost, we'll start off with our main man behind the sticks, Ed Mendy. What would you give him at the moment?
Ooh, I'd have to give him a 9. And I think the outlook is positive because he's kept us in games. I think about the City game. We could have been down 3-4-0. I mean, honestly, beyond the lucky chance that Gabriel Jesus, put in, City had a lot of other chances in that game. And when we were trying to go for a goal, they carved us open quite a few times. And if it weren't for Edouard Mendy making himself big in the goal, I think that, it could have been a lot worse. He made a couple unbelievable saves.
Yes.
And honestly kept us in. And I think he's, beyond the odd nervous pass from the back that sometimes when we're passing it behind in the back to try to reset play, I think that, there's been very little that I can complain about with Mendy. I really think that he's made some results better than they otherwise would have been. So I'm going to go for a 9 with a trend of an outlook of positive.
Excellent. And I agree with that, because also you brought up the Man City game. Let's also not forget against Aston Villa. We were up 1-0, but they had a couple of good chances where they could have easily equalised and also even maybe snuck in front at some points. But to me, that's the value of a fantastic goalkeeper, is because there's not always a time when you're going to be caught into action, but when you are, you've got to be the difference. And he definitely is the difference for us at the moment. But I also want to give a bit of a shout out. And so for me, I agree with your rating, but I also want to give a shout out to his compatriot and colleague in Keppa, because I think he has someone that's demonstrated a lot of professionalism since, being under the spotlight for not so good reasons. And I think for us, the fact that since every time he's been called on by Tuchel, he continues to deliver. Like, you're not seeing the same person that appears vulnerable or fragile. Like, I think his confidence is building back up. He looks a bit physically stronger and sharper. I don't know, it's just me maybe, but I reckon once African Cup of Nations comes around, and assuming Mendy goes, etc., I feel a lot more confident now with Keppa at the back. So any quick thoughts on Keppa before we go on to the defenders?
Well, I think that's a great point. Keppa is responsible for us to even having a few Keppa is responsible for us having a trophy in the Super
Absolutely.
Cup. And he's what I love about him most is that he's been very, very professional. You know, he's a keeper that has the talent where he could start at many clubs in the world. And he's been through an up and down time at Chelsea. He has really worked hard, and when he's been called upon, he's stepped up with the utmost professionalism. He's been solid in the back. There's been times maybe in some games where he hasn't had to do too much, but when he has been called upon, he's done the job. So you can only ask him to do what's put in front of him. And he's done that. And like I said, he's been professional. You haven't heard reports in the media of him complaining about not having his place. He's ready to compete. And, you know, long term, I'm sure he's not going to be satisfied with that. But right now, he's proving himself to be a very valuable member of the squad. And I think it's absolutely right that you know what you said about him, that he's been an important part of the team. And like I said, he's one of the reasons that we have some silverware already this season.
Absolutely. Well said. And you just don't forget sometimes what I like about him is that, and this is compliment to Tuchel as well, as in the fact that he's been able to manage him, because I think one of the things that doesn't get spoken about often enough is the difficulties of managing a large and talented squad and trying to keep everybody on side, because you can't start 25 people each week and even play them. So trying to keep that squad harmony is a difficult task. So that's one of the things that, again, Thomas Tuchel's done very, very well since joining. Now, looking at the defenders, Pat, I'm looking at this list, and it's an incredible list, isn't it? You've got, first and foremost, I think the man of the moment, defensively speaking, he's just been someone. I think the biggest compliment we can pay this man is the fact that when the team sheet is named, that position is just locked in, bolted on. Antonio Rudiger, what are your thoughts about him so far?
Oh, he's been sensational. Ever since Thomas Tuchel came in, he's made that left center back spot his own, and we don't really have a natural replacement for him, you know, like we do at right center back or even in the central position of the three. So that's made him that much more important. And he's forgive my language, he's done a little bit of that. I'll try to think of a different way to say it. I don't want to use colorful language here. He's not afraid to cause trouble on the pitch.
Yes, Housery. Is that what you're thinking about? Yes.
Yes, I didn't know if I was allowed to say it, but yeah, exactly what I was talking about.
Yes.
But he's not afraid to wreak havoc on the pitch. He's got that steely personality. Oh, absolutely. Yes. Very well said, Chelsea perspective. He does. Thomas Tuchel maximizes the ability out of the side. That's a great point. And Antonio Rudiger is no exception. He has that steely presence about him. He puts in the right tackle at the right time. And even sometimes when our attack isn't really going at 100%, he will drive forward and make something happen. And so for that reason, if we're giving a rating, I would give Rudiger a 9 as well, only because I don't really believe in giving out 10s, but Rudiger has been about as good as you can ask him to be. And that trend is positive. And really, I hope we get to see him sign a new contract, because I do not want to see him get to January and have the ability to negotiate with other clubs.
Yeah, we might touch on that a little bit later, because there are some player situations where the board, I want to hear your thoughts and obviously get the live chat to see what they're thinking around prospective player departures and incoming, etc. Because, yeah, he's one of our golden eggs at the moment in terms of purple patch form and the leadership he's bringing, and he's really turned a leaf over since Tuchel's come in and played with a lot more confidence, it seems. But for me, I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying, and I think the performances he's putting in, the sheer consistency, that like we said, that character, we'll call it a nice way, that what he brings to the team, and he gives him that extra bit of aggression and cutting edge to help those around him. I think for us, he's arguably our most consistent player, high performing, and 9 with a stable outlook for me is nothing less than what he deserves. So looking at some of his other partners, Thiago Silva, as they say, like a fine wine, he gets better with age. What are your thoughts on this Brazilian stalwart?
I just absolutely love watching Thiago Silva play. Sometimes I have to kind of kick myself to realize that he's actually a Chelsea player. What I love about Thiago Silva is, as he's gotten older, he's lost a little bit of the pace that he used to have and the speed. But what he's kept is that intelligence in his positioning, and he so what he lacks in pace, he makes up for in intelligent positioning. So he knows the players that are quicker than he is, and he positions himself accordingly. And he just has that intelligence to play the right ball, to make the right move at the right time, to push up when he needs to marshal the defense. So that's why he's so good in the center of the three. It's because he has that ability to marshal Rudiger or Aspi or Christensen, and he just makes everybody better around him. And that's what I think is the best part about him, is that as good as he is, people listen to him because he commands that respect and he makes everyone around him better. And so for that reason, I'm going to give him,
He certainly plays like a Chelsea.
He sure does. And for that reason, that's a perfect segue. I hate to sound like a broken record. I'm giving him a 9 as well, because I think at times he's just been the best player on the pitch. And he made a lot of, in some of our wins, he's made, game-saving tackles. And he's been, if he's not been man of the match in a lot of the games, he's been in the conversation. So the trend on him is still positive. I would love to see him sign another, we still have to see. And I know I'm kind of praising him in isolation, but it's hard not to just be effusive in my praise for him, because I just don't see any downward trend with him. If he's not playing West Brom, he's phenomenal. And and so I think that the trend for him is positive, because he's not going to lose that intelligence from me. So I don't think he's going to lose much pace between the age of, what is he now, 37 and 37 and 38. That intelligence is still going to be there. So, and he's proven that he can do it. So I'd love to see him stick around, and that's why I give him a 9 with the trend of positive.
If he's 37, I feel like I'm 57, just because of how good he is. He just defies human logic. Some of these athletes, like we said, Ronaldo, he's another one again, Ibrahimovic, all these players that just seem to transcend the basic law of physics. But for me, Thiago Silva, and another good example is from the Villa game. There was that point when it was 1-0 and he done that last-ditch block, when I'm certain if he wasn't in the way, it's an equalising goal, and then who knows where the game goes at that point. But he's just, again, he was also, you probably recall, in terms of this is a bit of a monthly breakdown, he got the goal scoring for us to start off our rampant victory against Tottenham with that bullet header. So he's, again, not just a great defensive contributor, but he's also so dangerous in the attacking sense, particularly from set pieces. But also another thing where I'm just so amazed by his ability is how good he is with his passing, and not just his short range passing, but his long range passing. He's just so versatile. He offers so much to the team, and I just think it's a shame that we couldn't get him 5 years ago. But that's being greedy. I'm accepting for what it is now, and the way he's playing, I know it might sound crazy to the common listener, and I'm keen to see what people think that listening to even now or later on. But is there opportunity for him, based on how he's performing, to then extend his contract yet again? Because, we can't just discriminate based on his age. The proof's in the pudding. And if he's delivering on the pitch, and it's a merit-based system, then why wouldn't we consider extending? But looking at someone that appears to be the heir to him, Andreas Christensen, he's been, again, someone that's demonstrated a lot of consistency and someone that's hardly put a foot wrong. That said, he has got a lot of competition now based on what's happening around him. But I've been quietly impressed with what the silent achiever is doing. What are your thoughts about Christensen so far?
It's honestly hard to really criticize any of the defense, but I agree with you. Christensen is someone that, I'll just be completely honest. Before when he was out of the side, I didn't really have, I I didn't really have the confidence that he'd be able to come in and do what he's done. And I've had to eat humble pie ever since. And I'm so glad that I was wrong, because it means Chelsea benefits. But ever since he's come back in, he's been sensational. He kind of looks like the player that we saw under Antonio Conte, but he's even better now. And I think I give Thiago Silva some credit for that, because I think the chance to learn off of someone like Thiago Silva, but that's not to take anything away from Christensen, because at the end of the day, he still has to do the work on the pitch. He still has to do the work on the training ground. He's even gotten a little bit more steely in the way he plays, because that's something that was always talked about with him, was his toughness, was that he got pushed off the ball. I think
he battle hardened, isn't he? There was always the question, that perception that can he cut it in such a physical league?
Yeah, my man Nick. But yeah, as far as Christensen, I think I'd be doing him a disservice. I got to give him a 9 as well, because I really haven't seen him put a foot wrong. Because even in some of our bad performances, RJ, as you said, the positive in those games was our defense. And I know that the City game, that we got carved open a little bit, but that was the circumstances of the game for me, because we got they got that lucky goal, and then we were going after the equalizer, so we were a little bit more open. We weren't playing in that same type of system that we normally play in, and I think we were all kind of moving forward, desperate to get that goal. So Christensen for me deserves a 9 as well, and he's trending positive, because I think he's really being influenced by the likes of Rudiger, the likes of Thiago Silva, and people that are around him. And I've been hearing the rumors. I know we'll get into this about players coming and going, but I've heard the rumors about a possible 4-year contract for Christensen. I can only hope that's true, because we got to keep him around.
That's right, because I think, and this is one of those situations where you've got a really great performing defence, but the reality of the situation is it's a little bit top heavy in terms of the age group there. So you don't want a situation where you've got all of these great defenders performing at this really high level, but because they're approaching the tail ends of their careers and again a little bit on, we don't want a mass exodus and a massive drop in standards there. So I think it's all about locking down our prized assets, especially for the medium to long term. And obviously Christensen being 25, I believe, a 4-year extension is not only just good business today, but good business for tomorrow as well. So some good thoughts as well from Nick and Chelsea perspective on top of what you've mentioned with Christensen. I agree. I thought he did have a bit of a challenging time against Juventus with Chiesa at times, but the reality at the moment is he's someone that's going to give all defenders a bit of a hard time. So it'd be a little bit unfair to downgrade him on that. And even still, he's been performing at a really admirable level. And every time he comes in, similar to like Thiago Silva, not from an attacking sense, but both very composed defensively and also very good with distributing the ball, which is obviously a key part of Tuchel's mantra. So moving on to a player for me. Now, this is someone here that I've been totally 100% surprised by his evolution and just how seamless his transition to the side is. Trevor Chalobah, wow, what a player he's been so far. I don't want to make bold statements, pun intended, but I just think he's someone that if he keeps on his trajectory, his ceiling could be quite high for us, because I'm just so impressed by his composure and his touch, like the ability to dribble out of danger, the passes he's willing to make. All of these things suggest that we've got someone that's the ready-made article, and that's the biggest compliment. He's not someone that's transitioning. He's someone that if we're going to name him on the team sheet, I'm not, I'm a bit nervous about that. No, he to me just looks ready for the first team. What do you think about Chalobah?
I am a humongous Trevor Chalobah fan, and I think what you said covers it perfectly. When he comes in and he's asked to do a job, you don't get nervous at all, because you may have been when you saw his name on the team sheet for the first game, but even with what we saw in preseason, I mean, it started from his first appearances in preseason, and it carried on into the regular season. That Thomas Tuchel trusted him in the Super Cup. He didn't put a foot wrong. And ever since then, whenever he's been called upon, he's done the job. And, there's little moments here and there where you can see the youth in him and dribbling in certain
overzealousness. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that comes from a level of confidence that he has in his ability. And I'm never going to fault him for having that, because I think you need to have that confidence at this level. And he deserves to have that confidence. He proved in like what Nick said, he's humble, and he's already put in a few goals. So,
and different goals, Pat, as well.
Yes.
One, the long-range speculator, so he's got a great technique on him, which is a good insight. And the fact that he's willing to put his body in the line with that diving header because he wasn't too far away from the post. So I just love his tenacity as well.
Oh, I do too. And I love his ball playing ability as well, because he's got a good pass in him. I don't think that gets talked about enough, is that he has the ability to play a good ball, and he's got a good shot. And he's proven in really challenging situations with some of his loans that he can play in really, like, I don't think people understand, like, sometimes going on loan to somewhere like Ipswich Town is not an easy place to play. Or going to I believe it was Huddersfield, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, and then obviously last season when he went to Lorient in Ligue 1, and he did a great job. I mean, it wasn't easy to go to play the likes of PSG, Marseille, Lille, and in a tough Ligue 1 last season. And he was someone that stood out, and he was someone that in Lorient's games that was always a standout performer, or at least more times than not. And to go to one of Europe's top 5 leagues and to put in and to become a starter and to really put in really good performances, and then to come back to Chelsea and prove yourself, because you kind of came back to a blank slate because you have so many good players at this club. He wasn't even being talked about. All we were thinking about was what would be his next loan destination.
Yes, absolutely.
And he comes in and he forces his way into Thomas Tuchel's thinking, which does two things. Number one, it proves that Thomas Tuchel is telling the truth when he says, if you put in performances, you may be put into my plans. And number two, it means that Trevor Chalobah has a brilliant work ethic, because he, like I said, he forced himself into the reckoning, and he's gotten himself very well-earned playing time. So for that, I'm going to go a 9.
Yes, agreed.
Because he's been scoring goals. He's not causing goals to be conceded. He's doing everything that the manager asks him to do. So it's just, I can't give him a rating lower than that.
Agreed.
He's been positive. The trend is
absolutely positive. Got nothing more to add to that one. He's a shining star, and I'm hoping he shines brightly throughout the rest of the season and beyond for the Blues. Now, just looking at another player who, on a different end of the spectrum in terms of his career and tenure at the club, but Captain Cesar Azpilicueta. What we talk about Thiago Silva and experience and the leadership he brings, our actual captain by nature, he's someone who there's been a lot of questions about, is his influence waning a little bit? Are we starting to see signs here that maybe there's a natural changing of the guard to Reece James? But for me, I'm so impressed with his ability just to focus and keep his eyes on the prize and let his on-field performances do the talking, while the rest of us couch critics do our speculating. But his performances at the moment, like, I don't think he'll be able to maintain it consistently throughout the whole season, but he just continues to let his performances do the talking. I've been super, super impressed with Dave. What about you, Pat? What do you think about Azpilicueta so far?
Well, the thing about Dave is this: a lot of times we don't talk about him, but the thing about that is we don't talk about him because he consistently puts in like 7, 8 out of 10 performances. He puts in, he's a leader by example. He's the consummate professional, and Great. Like I said, we take him for granted a little bit sometimes as a fan base, I think. Because, like Chelsea Perspective said, the grit, the determination, the commitment, like I said, he's not always the vocal leader that, say, a John Terry would have been. He's not that type of leader to me. What he does, But what he is a leader in is that he demands the same level of effort on the pitch that he gives, because he's not going to ask you to give any less than what he's willing to give. And yes, he's lost a little bit of pace, but still one-on-one defending, I still think he's one of the best in the world. And he's getting older, but he still has that intelligent brain. I like him better in the central defense more so than I do on, like, say, at a right wing back. But that's not a knock on Cesar. I just think the demands of that position don't always reflect what Cesar's greatest strengths are. And I think that one-on-one defending and his ability to get out and make that last-ditch tackle, Cesar is willing to do all of that. And he's been nothing short of sensational for me. Like you said, I think we have to make sure we manage him well, and that I have no doubt Tomas Tuchel is going to do that. But Tomas Tuchel's made it very clear, though, that he appreciates the leadership on the pitch that Aspie brings. And
you know what, Pat, I think the best way to sum him up is he's just a leader by example. He's
Absolutely.
someone that you want out there in the trenches with you, and he's someone that I think can inspire those around him, because when your legs are getting a bit heavy or your head's down, the fact that you see him continue to keep plugging away, as they say, inadvertently causes you to think, oh, geez, how can I let him down? And he's the one that's continuing to work hard despite going through a tough patch in the match or whatever. So he's just a consummate professional, as you were saying. And for me, I know you didn't get a chance to get your rating, but I'll get mine in first. I have to give him a 9 also. And I actually think another thing that he gets underrated with is sometimes his crossing ability, which we're now starting to see signs of him in his Morata days come back to light again, as we saw with Lukaku recently. So who knows, right wing back might not be his preferred position, but his versatility is one of his key attributes, and that's why he's able to hover seamlessly between RCB and RWB. But yeah, what do you think in terms of a rating for our captain?
Completely agree. I would say anything less than a 9 would be a disservice to what he brings. It's not just for the on-field performance. I also take into that just his intangibles. Like I said, that professionalism, that not asking anyone to do, like I said, what he's willing to do himself. He's going to give that and then some. And he plays for the love of the shirt, for the love of the badge. And that's the kind of person you want leading your club on the pitch.
Beautifully said. Now, a bit more controversially as we get to the rest of the defenders, and we'll pivot through this pretty quickly, but Reece James started off super strong, copped a bit of an injury. He's been out of the picture since, but hopefully he's now coming back to, after the international break, we can start to see the best of him again. I'll go first in terms of a rating. I think based on what we've seen so far, I've been really impressed with him, what he's been contributing to the team, obviously with that great goal against Arsenal as the icing on the cake. I would give him an 8 at the moment just because of the availability angle. I know that's not fair on him because it's an injury, so it's an externality. But I think I'd give him an 8, but with a outlook of positive, because I know that he's not showing bad form. In fact, he's actually looking great. So I think there's more to come from him. And once we get that injury past, he's going to add another dimension to our attack as well. So what do you think?
I've got to agree with you on the 8. It's unfortunate that he hurt that ankle. I hope that, and I don't know if that was ever confirmed to be like a high ankle sprain, but it's going to be interesting to see how he recovers from that. I still think the outlook is positive, but I agree. I think he's been outstanding. He adds a dimension to that right wing back position that no one else can really bring. His crossing ability to me is one of the best that we have, if not the best. And just his natural strength is amazing. And so I think an 8's a fair rating, because there's been a few games in there where maybe he hasn't been quite at his best, but I think he's been sensational, and I think there's just more good to come from him.
I agree. Now, looking at the left-hand side of the pitch, Marcus Alonso, and I was watching a little bit of the France-Spain game before we jumped online, and I saw him do a couple of really important slide tackles. I'm thinking, what a return to form it has been since his days under Super Frank, and the trajectory for him was definitely deteriorating, to put it lightly. But the fact that he's been able to chip away and slowly get back into the good books, and I think, given the long season it is, I'm actually I'm actually quietly happy that we've been able to rely on him and not just put all of our eggs in Chilwell's basket, because, like I said, there's a high volume of fixtures and I want to see some balance. I have noticed a little bit of a dip slightly in Marcos over the last couple of games, but I think some of that's a function of a little bit of fatigue because he's not the most athletic of our defence. But overall, I've been more pleased than less pleased with his performances. What do you make of the return of Marcos to the squad?
Well, I've never probably been the biggest Marcos Alonso cheerleader, but I also want to be fair, because I think when he came in at the beginning of preseason and he took advantage of the situation and made that position his own. And I've always thought he's much better going forward than obviously being in defense. He doesn't have the pace that, say, I think a Ben Chilwell does. I personally think Ben Chilwell is a better defender. That's absolutely no disrespect to Alonso, because I think with what we've asked Alonso to do, he's done quite well. I think his corners have been quite good.
Yes.
More often than not, I think the crossing's been better than I would say it has been in the past. And maybe, and like Chelsea Perspective said, maybe it is a byproduct of the fact that he has played so much and that he needs a little bit more rest. But I agree, his form's tailed off a little bit. That's also coincided with Ben Chilwell, the one defensive mistake aside that caused the penalty, of course. And that I think Ben Chilwell has played well, in the limited time that he's played.
Yes.
But as far as Alonso, as far as a rating, I'm going to go 7.5. That may sound a bit harsh to people, but I'm thinking about the defensive work along with that, because sometimes Alonso, when he's in games, he'll kind of go missing, and people will load up on the right side to try to go past him. But he's had good defensive moments this season.
Definitely.
More so than I would say he has in the past. And I think sometimes, as I've heard other creators say in the past, sometimes when Alonso gets a run in the side, he looks like sometimes he might get a little complacent. I haven't seen that since,
I think, what else is, I was just going to chime in there. So I think that this campaign, defensively speaking, he's been a lot less erratic. I think he has improved, and I think just Chelsea's Perspective was the one who brought up the way to mask Alonso's deficiency. I think that's also a bit of a function of a system and the way he's been protected, but also credit where it's due. I think he has improved his own game and got himself positionally more sensible, not just bombing up the pitch and leaving himself super exposed to, be found out. But I think I actually agree with the 7.5 rating, because I think it's a reflection of how much he's improved, actually, not even though it's relative to the other defenders. But I actually think some of that is because, like I said, the recent outlook, which I would say is between steady and deteriorating slightly, because I think, again, it comes back to athleticism and the high volume of fixtures. I feel, being in the wing-back position, we know of his great technique and his striking ability and his ability to deliver a fantastic cross. But I think the question, and we started seeing some of it against not just City, but in a couple of other performances of late, it's the ability to be able to make sure you are consistently going up and down and offering that point of attack. Whereas I felt like he slowly started losing some of that impetus. So I think for him, and I saw him again for Spain this morning, he was quite good, actually. So if you're judging off that isolation performance, I'd probably give him a little bit more. But overall, because we're assessing it for the whole period, I think a 7.5 and a steady is appropriate, I think. And credit to him for keeping Chilwell honest. I do see Chilwell, which we're going to touch on now. But for me, I'm actually quite happy that we've got some genuine competition in that spot. But speaking of that competition, Ben Chilwell, he's come back into the side recently. You did touch on the silly penalty he gave away against Livramento, who it's a shame he didn't play for Chelsea once, but hopefully he can come back at some point because he's a little hot prospect. But overall, it's good to see Chile starting to slowly find his feet now. And of course, he scored that vital goal in the end to give us that 2-goal buffer against the Saints. But for me, Chilwell is someone that I know we can still see a lot more to come from him, and I think we will. So I think that's probably the most promising thing out of all of this, is that he hasn't been great because he's been slowly eased back into it, but he's showing signs of promise. What are your thoughts on Chile quickly?
Yeah, I think that it's just good to see Chile on the pitch. And, it sounded like he had a bit of a crisis of confidence, based on some of the stuff that Thomas Tuchel talked about. And I think that I think it's just good to see him out on the pitch and chip in with a couple goals here and there. I don't think I can give him a rating as high as Alonso, because I think overall Alonso has given more out of the position this season than Chilwell has, and that's probably more out of sample size. So I'm going to go 6.5 for Chilwell, which, because of that mistake, that I think he's a better defender than what he showed in that one-on-one, and I can't punish him for just that. But I think it's a combination of, trying to get up to speed in the side, and also just a lack of appearances that I've seen from him so far. So I think the trajectory is positive, though.
Yeah,
and I think that, like I said, I think it would be really unfair on Marcos Alonso if I gave Chile a higher rating than him, because I think overall Marcos Alonso hasn't deserved to be out of the side. And just, so as far as Chilwell, I'm going to go 6.5 with the trend of positive.
Yeah, well said, mate. So I've been observing some great chat in the live chat as well. It's always a good debate. We've got the question of, if we do sell Alonso, who do you think Chelsea should try to sign to be a second option? It is a good question at the moment. But for me, Anthony, because I know we got rid of Emerson, I don't think we would sell Alonso now because of how good he's been playing. But also, I think for us, we've got some good competition now. I know Alonso's been in the media recently saying, I wouldn't mind going playing in Spain, but I think that's a later problem for us. So for me, I'm not looking at January as that sort of time where we would look to make any changes, because why change a winning formula for us? So I'll leave it at that. Pat, did you have any thoughts? Did you have anyone that's hot prospect that you'd want to bring back in? Maybe Livramento?
Livramento would be my first option.
For sure.
And I don't know if he's more of a, I guess Livramento is actually more of a right wing back option, but I'd love to bring him back into the left wing back, if because I think he could play either side. But if that were the case, but again, I agree with you. I don't see any need to change anything in January. I think we'll have to wait and see what happens next summer. I'm not advocating to get rid of Alonso or to get rid of Chile or anything, but we have to see, like you do every summer, you have to reevaluate. What does the player want? What does the club want? What's the contract situation? And then we move from there. But, again, I know I saw in the chat where someone said it was harsh, the rating I gave him. And I understand that, but I do give him massive amounts of credit for, the improvements in Alonso's performance I've seen this season overall versus what we saw last season.
Yeah, that's fair, cool. I think there's always that tendency to reflect on the broader sample size, but overall this season has been very, very well, and fingers crossed he continues. They continue to push each other, because we're going to need everybody to chip in if we want to dream big this season. That's the defense, and I think it's fair to say that they've been the ones where it's a lot easier to give the ratings because of just how good they've been performing. But just looking at our midfielders, which is not as stacked, but I'll start off with the midfielder that I think has been super impressive since taking on that iconic number 8, our Croatian sensation, Mateo Kovacic. He's been really strong for me. I think the way I would sort of describe his evolution is the fact that he's someone that had the tagline of being the box-to-box midfielder that wasn't good in either box, was the sort of commentary that went with him, fairly or unfairly. But for me, the improvement in terms of his progressive passes and his forward thinking, and I know that there are some people who will say, well, he used to do that, but they weren't being capitalised on. I agree he did that to an extent, but I'm seeing a lot more natural instinct to play forward. And really, he's someone that on his day, when he combines his great dribbling ability and he's got such a strong technique in terms of that pass, when he lines all of those up together, he's a special player. And I think he's been so important for us this season. So, yeah, super impressive, Kovacic. What do you make of him?
Agreed. I think he's been. I would say the one thing about Mateo Kovacic is I wish we'd see more of that beautiful goal that he scored. That little dink that he put over in the left corner. Yeah, I mean that shows that to me that he has it in him, but I don't see enough of the end product in terms of a shot. But I think what you said was well taken. I think that he's been. I think his moving forward, his decision making has definitely improved, and really his passing to me has been just exquisite. I mean, he's played. What was it? That pass to
Romelu, that one?
Romelu Lukaku.
The defense splitting one, yeah.
Yes, the defense splitting one. I mean, that pass of the season for me. And we know he's always been a good dribbler. That's something he's always had in his toolbox. But he, like you said, he's making better decisions with his passing. So he's not. I've seen less of the driving forward and then losing the ball. He's been driving forward, but then he's been making a smart pass, and I think his stats have. I don't know all the stats, but I think his stats would back that up. That is like his passing efficiency and important passes. I think that I would say that that's definitely impressed me, and I think you could probably argue he's deserved even more starts than he's gotten, but that's what happens when you have the quality midfield options that we have, and really I've been very impressed with Mateo Kovacic this season.
Yeah, no, very well said. And I think apart from his improvement in the attacking sense, I've been also quietly pleased with how more involved he is in terms of steadying the ship, because as we know, Jorginho hasn't been present for 100% of the games now, and he's looking someone that could definitely use a bit of a break. So the fact that we can have someone like Kovacic come in there and act as that metronomic presence and just offer that genuine connection between back and front where we don't lose too much of that fluidity, I think is another compliment of how much he's become a focal point for our team. And Nick did bring up the point that he still can't shout, and he did say shoot after that. And I agree. And I think, look, apart from that clever dink he brought up, there was that instance where against Man City, I think he had the ability and he just couldn't get a good shot away. I'm thinking, why couldn't that be Mason Mount or Loftus-Cheek? But it's hard you can't be perfect in every facet of the game, because what he's bringing this season, if he continues it, and Nick again said it, he's definitely a player of the year candidate. He's won it before, and you wouldn't put it past him. The thing for me about him is his determination. He's not spoken about enough. So he knows he's up against it with N'Golo Kante, Jorginho, player of the year. He knows that he's got to fight for his place. And for me, he's really taken on that responsibility and given Tuchel some headaches. So if I had to give a rating, I'd say I'd give him a 9 overall. I'd say outlook, I'd say steady at the moment, because I'm not seeing continued massive improvements from here on in. But I'm seeing now he's already hit that high level so far. I think he's on that steady track. My outlook is definitely he's not regressing, but I'm not saying he's continuing to massively improve week on week. But he's already at that high level now. And as long as he can continue delivering at that high level, I think that he could be quite instrumental for us. What would you give him?
I was going to give him an 8.5, only because of the shooting. But which I know that's probably going to be harsh to the chat, and I get it, but I think also steady. I agree with you that I think he's really hit a high level and he's improved as a player, season on season, and deserves to be in the side. And great point about him having the ability to be a metronome when Jorginho isn't in there, because we're used to seeing him, running around the field whenever you have Jorginho in there, because you've got Jorginho staying at home, being that metronome. And, the 8.5 rating too probably has a little bit of a byproduct of us losing a couple of midfielder battles against teams this season as a unit. That's not a knock on Mateo personally, because I think it's a collective responsibility. But I think that he's been great, and I don't think he's dropped in form. And I think that he, like you said, he's maintained that improved level that he's had since the start of the season.
Well said. And thanks to Blue Lounge for contributing. Go check out his channel. It does a great job, and I've been on there a couple of times now, so go check out Mo and the crew there. Now, the next midfielder in the firing line for our very arbitrary subjective rating assessment, the man who seems to be winning it all, my compatriot, who's instrumental to help us win the Euros, played a big role in us in the Champions League, J5, the J55, Jorginho. What do you make of him so far? Because for me, I'll give some initial thoughts. We've done a good job in being able to use his presence when he's there. I think he's someone that when he's on the field, his influence is very visible. I think he's someone that really sharpens up the way in which we connect the dots and gets our attack moving. He's someone that's very vocal, and he's really good at moving the chess pieces around. I think he is a unique player, and I think he has been performing quite well so far. But I do think the way Tuchel's been managing him, because he's had a lot of minutes in his legs, has been really smart man management. But overall, I've continued to be impressed with him, and I don't see too many frailties from him, whereas I might have called that out last season at the start of the season before that, where he was getting a little bit overrun by midfielders. But overall, yeah, he's looked pretty strong for me. What do you think?
Oh, I think Jorginho's been outstanding. The leadership that he brings, that I've at times probably underestimated, and I think last season I probably did underestimate it at times. And one criticism I always had about Jorginho were his struggles against the press. One way to play against Jorginho is if you really press him, that he struggled to play out of attack. I think that was part of that might have been still trying to get used to the quickness of the Premier League too. I think it might have been a little bit of that, but I think that, like you said, he's a player that needs rest, like Chelsea Perspective just said as well. And I think that when he comes into the side, he calms down the side. And like Nick just said, I think he's continued his good form. I think he really, I think about his performance last season in the Champions League final, it just epitomizes what Jorginho is about. He's added to his game in terms of, I think he plays better now against the press than he used to. I think he's worked on that part of his game. He's always been able to pass, and he's done a little bit more forward passing this year too, that I think has been a criticism of his in the past. People kind of thought he'd go for the convenient pass, either the side pass or pass it back to kind of reset play. I think he's taking, and maybe it's at the urging of Tuchel, or maybe it's just something he noticed, but I think he's done some more forward passing and some more trying to force the issue a little bit more, which I think is a good thing. And then maybe that's from his good form with Italy, and obviously a very successful Euros for him this past summer. And honestly, I probably had to give him a 9, because I think he's been he's, like Nick just said in the chat, he's really come a long way. And I think Nick made a good point too. If what I can hear at the bridge, they sing his name. I know he's a player on social media that divides opinion. There are people that are very...
Does he? I didn't know we spoke about him enough.
Oh, well, I may have mosted at least once or twice. I don't know if you've ever seen it. But I know this may surprise you. Mason Mount sometimes is the same way, but
Yeah.
I know it's a shocker. But I'm since I brought it up, I'm a part of that camp. Like, why can't we like both? They're different players that bring different strengths to me, and I think both make the side better.
Yeah,
And
it's interesting, isn't it?
Even when Jorginho's come on as a second half substitute in games where he's been rested, he instantly improves the side because he calms the team down. That metronome, he kind of, everything kind of goes through him, and he kind of, makes things a little bit more organized. He passes the ball around. We seem more at ease with him in the side. So I'd give him a 9, and I'd say trending, not so much trending positive, but kind of maintaining. I think he's maintained that same level because I think he's kind of reached that high level, and it's hard to argue when you're the UEFA Men's Player of the Year.
Exactly. So, no, very well said. Not much more to add to that. So, totally agree with your rating and analysis, and some great chatter in the live chat. So, keep it up, legends. For me, a player that's one of my favourites for many seasons, and not just when he joined the Blues, but N'Golo Kante. He's unfortunately been struck down with obviously the COVID influence, and we wish him all the best with his recovery. And I understand that it is coming along nicely. But for me, I think the key example, Nick wanted to highlight examples about the Villa game. Here's the example when he came on against Tottenham. He's someone when fully fit and raring to go, he genuinely changes teams. His indefatigable nature, I know it's cliche to say the work rate in the engine room, but the reality is his stamina is unlike anybody else. And not just the stamina, there is a genuinely good football player we're talking about here. And I think sometimes it's unfair the way we speak about him, that he's only a robot, but he's actually a robot that's built for playing football. Like, he's just someone he's a complete package for me. He's a midfielder at heart. He's someone that aggressively pursues the ball. He's someone that positionally puts himself in the best position possible. He works hard. He's got a team first mentality behind him. And of course, ever since he's been working under Sarri through to now, he's really refined the attacking elements of his game. So, look, I don't know. He's had a tough one against City. I know that. And I know Nick brought it up here. But I think, again, it's a team sport. To single him out on his own would be a little bit harsh, in my opinion, because the whole team was being overrun. I felt the best way I could describe that game is we were operating as 3 separate teams. You had defence, you had the midfield, who was basically being choked in, and then you got the front people who were completely disconnected. So because of that, I think the people in the middle of the pitch get the most attention brought on them. But overall, I think for me, he's because of the injury, I can't give him the same rating as a Jorginho and Kovacic just because of their influence. But I'd say that I'd be leaning towards something like a 7.5 for him, knowing that when he comes back in, I know what he's going to bring to the team, so I'm going to give him a positive outlook. But what do you think? I know this could be a bit controversial for the discussion.
And I'll be the first to admit, because I'm such a huge fan of Kante, I'm trying to take it out of it, but there may be a little bit of this still left. I'm just going to go ahead and admit that now. I'm going to give him an 8. Again, I agree with you. I don't think we can give him the same rating that we gave a Kova or a Jorginho. And and I see in the comments that if there's going to be some difference of opinion, I respect that. And there's no one else like N'Golo Kante to me. And no one can exactly do what he can do. Oh, wow. 6.5 from Nick. Okay.
I thought Nick liked Kante. No, I'm just kidding, Nick.
But I just think that more often than not, the City performance aside, whenever Kante comes onto the pitch, he instantly becomes one of the best players. But the inconsistency in his availability has to be taken into account as well. And maybe 8 could be considered a little too high. I can see where people might think that, but I guess I just get caught up in everything that he's able to do. Like, that just that, like you said, that engine, and I know that's an overused term, but that work rate, that engine that he has, he's just so important to the side when he's available. And so maybe I'm giving him a little bit of, because of his unique playing, that I'll give him an 8. I'm just going to stick with it. I will, like I said, I'm going to add that little tagline that there's probably a little bit of Patrick's love of N'Golo Kante that's mixed in there a little bit. So I readily admit that, but I'm going to go with an 8 with a trend of slightly positive, because I'm hoping that with the way he's being carefully managed, that he's going to be available for the entire season. So I'm going to go for an 8 with N'Golo Kante.
Well, when we look at the next month's review, Pat, which hopefully you and the others in the chat, by the way, been an awesome discussion. Please smash that like button and share it with your friends. Subscribe. Fal, I think this might be the first time I've seen you, so thanks for joining. But for us, this is the beauty of these subjective discussions, is you're going to get some very wide-ranging opinions and highlight certain things. Like Nick's highlighted the availability angle. We've highlighted the influence, like what he did for us against Tottenham. That we've got to remember, the context was 0-0 at halftime, and we weren't looking great. When he came on, instantly transformed us. So it just depends on the weighting you want to give to certain elements. But for me, the positive out of it is that despite the COVID thing, which is an externality again, provided he comes back and he can hit the ground running, he's someone that's we're already in first place. We know that. We haven't been playing well. But injecting him back into the side, along with our other midfielders who've been performing so well, it's only positive signs for us. So fingers crossed he does get back to his dizzying heights. But another midfielder for me, now we spoke about it earlier in the show, about his surprise emergence, but RLC, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, wow, what a player he's become. He got that, and Nick brought it up in his pod, I think it was yesterday, Nick, or the one before that, I can't recall, but I think it was yesterday. He came on for a couple of minutes at the end, and your Fulham mates had a laugh saying, why are they bringing him on for a couple of minutes sort of thing. But since then, they weren't just charity minutes. These were earned at training, and since then, he got another half an hour, and then since then, he's built upon that. So we're now seeing that Ruben, the real deal Loftus-Cheek, starting to come back into the fold, and I'm low-key getting a little bit excited. I don't want to get too reactionary of these things, but the fact that he's even playing in our squad, and not just playing, but being a positive contributor, it's just awesome to see. So I don't know, I'll let you go and give your thoughts on a rating in that, but for me, outlook is definitely a positive. That's not negotiable. But Pat, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, what do you make of him?
Well, first of all, I've been really, really happy to see him back in the side. Shout out to Rob.
Yeah, Robbie.
And I think that what I've loved is that when Ruben's been given an opportunity, he's taken full advantage of the time that he's been given. I think it was I can't remember which game it was. But when he came on, he came in the limited time that he's had. Like, there was one game where I forget the stat, but I know Alex Goldberg's talked about it and others have talked about it. But his key passes were like twice what Jorginho and Kante's were, and he played in like a fraction of the time. So what they played in like 75, 80 minutes, he doubled like the number of key passes that he had in 15. And he's what I love about Ruben is that a couple of things. I'm seeing in his appearances so far this season that he's driving the ball forward again, and that's a level of confidence that I haven't seen since he got injured. Since he tore his Achilles. We haven't seen that dynamic. I never saw it at Fulham, where he would just drive, because he's so good at driving. He's so powerful. He's so good at driving the ball forward and asking questions of the defense. And he's been doing that. And then another part of his game that I thought was one of his weaker points, but that I've seen look good so far in his appearances, is his tackling.
Yes.
And I think his tackling has improved. And he's, the more minutes that he gets and the more he gets on the pitch, he's looking better and better. And he's making a difference when he comes on, or when he starts from the beginning. He's making himself big, and he's making himself known in the defense. So I saw Nick gave a rating that I was going to agree with. I'm going to give him an 8 because it's only because it's a small sample size, and I want to, like Matisse always says, I want to like judge in isolation and praise in isolation, because we still have to see a lot more from him. But what we have seen so far has been brilliant, and it says a lot about his mental fortitude and his ability, his natural ability that he has, that he's gone from being kind of an afterthought, kind of like what Ross Barkley was, to all of a sudden the last few games they've put themselves in the reckoning. Like Ross Barkley, a key pass here in the last 2 games.
Yes.
And Ruben taking a advantage of his opportunities. And that's what you want in the squad. You want people taking advantage of those opportunities that they're given, because, you may only get 15 minutes, you may only get 20 minutes, but it's what you do with that time that's going to determine like what minutes you get at a big club like Chelsea.
Well said. And I'm in that theme of doing what you can with the limited amount of time. We'll touch on that. There's a specific player I have in mind we'll get to. But in terms of Loftus-Cheek, look, Nick, I've got to say it's a bit interesting about Kante. You're saying his availability, you give him a 6.5, but there's of City. But now for Loftus-Cheek, based on his limited amount of time, you're giving him 8. So I am seeing a little bit of favouritism come here, and that's fine. This is a Chelsea love show. We will dedicate all of the positive vibes. But no, in all seriousness, I agree. I think the 8 makes sense for him just because of how positive his contribution has been based on that limited size. And that's why I think the outlook is very positive. And also his aerial presence. Let's not forget, he got things going against Southampton with his flick-on header for Chalobah to get the goal started. So, yeah, he's definitely now adding a direct goal threat. And the more minutes he gets, and hopefully his confidence grows, we can start to see more of his natural attacking abilities come to the fray. So, yeah, overall, very impressed with the big man. I'm not going to go into the other midfielders in terms of full analysis, but just as worthy mention of seeing, it's good to see Ross Barkley back in and getting in some minutes and making those limited minutes count, obviously, with his diagonal pass to Aspi, who squared it first time to Werner to get the second goal against the Saints. But it's nice to see that Tuchel was able to leverage off the deeper squad depth. And Saul, that's an interesting test case because we brought him in on loan with the option, not obligation, thankfully, option to buy. But for us, it's interesting to see just how Tuchel looks to inject him, because I know he was close to getting a game against the Saints, but Tuchel, I believe, was reluctant to give him a go because of the high pressing nature. But I thought, a lot of teams in the Premier League are high pressing in nature, and if they know that's a fear of his, then naturally, if he's playing, then you know what the strategy is going to be. So I don't want to cast a dark shadow on his Chelsea career, and I do hope he does get a couple of opportunities to show us his class because he is a top player.
Yeah.
But I just think it's going to be difficult knowing where he does get those minutes, given the plethora of midfielders we have to choose from. And the brutal reality, Pat, for me is we can't just afford to give people opportunities out of the goodness of their hearts. Tuchel's got a job on the line. Chelsea have expectations. It's a business. So, look, for his sake, I hope he continues to impress in training. And if he does get an opportunity, he does take those minutes. Any quick thoughts on Saul before we get into the attackers?
Yeah, I just think that Saul had an unfortunate start to life. Like, I think his debut was against Villa. It was right after the international break, and he was given a start against Villa and had a really tough time keeping up with the speed of the league. But again, it was his first game. He's got to have some time to build. But the problem is, and I'm not the first person to ever say this, but you're not really afforded the opportunity to be given time in the Premier League, especially when you're someone with Saul's experience. You kind of have to hit the ground running because you're not going to be given the time that Saul might need to hit the ground running, especially when the likes of Ruben and Barkley have, in the times that they've been given, have given positive contributions to the side. They've given us maybe the midfield depth that we didn't think we would have. because when we got Saul, we didn't think that we were wondering who was going to be the fourth option behind, Kova, Jorginho, and Conte. And, we were talking about, would we bring Mace back to be in that 8 role, or would we, so from there, like now we have Ross Barkley that we can bring in. We have Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who I think is actually the fourth choice right now based on form. And that can always change over the course of the season. But then, like I said, then we have Saul almost now seems like 5th or 6th choice. And, and that's not a knock on Saul. I think he really is a good player. I mean, he's a good footballer, but I just wonder, is he going to have the opportunity to do what he can do? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, I've only seen Saul play against Villa, because he got the start against Villa, and then I think he played against Villa in the cup, right?
I believe so.
Since?
No, I don't think so. But the live chat, you're more wise than I am. They can correct us if we're wrong. But it's been a bit of a shadow since.
Yeah, I've been wrong. I've been wrong many times, so it's possible. But it's a. I've only seen. I think his only Premier League experience has been against Villa, against the entire Villa squad between the 2 games. So
excellent. Yeah. No, look, we'll move on to the attackers just quickly, because I know there's been quite a fair amount here, and you could have dedicated streams to each of these players and positions, etc., because there's just so much to say. And that's what I love about this club and talking about it with you all. But for me, the attack now, we mentioned at the start of the stream, one of the positives I've taken out of the September performances is the fact that we've, at least, despite not playing fantastic, particularly in those first halves, managed to score 3 goals on 3 occasions during that period. For us, it's about really trying to firstly get some familiarity with who's our front 3, because I want some consistency. I like flexibility based on the opponent. Don't get me wrong. I think it's important to have options, but I also want to see some, like I said, familiarity to be able to develop that cohesion, because we really want, that can be the difference between a missed opportunity or scoring that vital goal that separates us from first and second, etc. So it's really about getting that quickly. I think that's probably an improvement opportunity. But the first in the attacking firing line is Hakim Ziyech. For me, look, I'll put it out there on the table. I'm expecting a bit more from him. He's someone that, when we got him, the Moroccan magician, as I like to have dubbed him at the time under Lampard, he was an X-factor player. He was someone I thought, okay, he's going to be the key to unlocking all of those stubborn low block defenses and really change the game for us. But for one reason or another, if it's change of system, change of manager, whatever it's been, I feel like he hasn't hit the ground running, so to speak, and it's not the curtains on him just yet, in my opinion. But for me, he's got a lot of ground to make up in terms of wanting to become not just a peripheral player in the squad, but to be maintained in the squad at all. Because behind all of it, there is a talented football player. It's just whether or not does his long-term interest suit being at the club. That's a big question mark. But for me, pretty underwhelming, and I can see there's a couple of people in the chat already giving their thoughts, but just some quick sentiments on that, Pat. Hakim Ziyech.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think there's a lot more to be desired from Hakim, especially with the way that he started in preseason. He was definitely one of our best players coming out of preseason, and I was like, well, maybe that second season is really going to help him. But then he kind of regressed to me back to the player that we saw last season, and maybe that's. And it may come down to the kind of player that he is, because when he was, as we know, when he was at Ajax, he was the guy that everything went through. He was the guy that had the majority of the ball. In his team like Chelsea, he's not going to get that opportunity. He's not the player that's going to be having the ball all the time. But even with the strengths that he brings, like when we're trying to get that key pass, whether it's a lack of chemistry with players or anything, but I think that final pass of his has been off too. And even some of his free kicks that we depend on him on, or corners, have not been quite of the quality that you'd expect of someone of Ziyech's undeniably phenomenal ability. I think he's a phenomenal footballer in terms of natural talent, but it depends on whether he wants to harness that talent, and is his mind really in the game sometimes? Because like the chat has said, he's been given opportunities. I think he's been given more opportunities than some other players have been, but he's not really stepped up and really, taking those chances like, say, Ruben Loftus-Cheek has when he gets chances. And Hakeem's had a lot more chances than Ruben has. And so I know different positions, but still, it's about taking your opportunities, like we said. And as far as a rating, this may be a little generous. I'm going to go a 6. And Rob has a great point. His injury record has not helped because it seems
and the off season as well. He came in at a really interesting time. Not that it's an excuse, but it's just a bit of context as well. So
and so I think that I'm going to give him a 6 only because I was going to take injuries into account. But at the same time, I think that we've had other players come back from injury and still contribute positively. So, if we're using that same measure, and I'm trying my best to be consistent, I think I can't give him any more than a 6. And as far as a trend, I mean, and I'm saying this on a basis of I've been unimpressed with what I've seen overall. I'm not going to go negative necessarily because I don't think he's regressed. I just don't think he's hit the heights that we come to expect from him. And I'm not going after players here. I don't believe in attacking players, and I know you don't either. And that's not what your podcast is about. So I'm not trying to get overly negative with a player, but I'm just going based off of opportunities that he's not hit the heights that, say, members of our defense have, or our midfield, or other players in attack have hit. So I'm going based off of comparing it off of what other players in the squad have done. Yeah,
I agree. Look, I would say 6 is generous. I'd even say as an argument for a 5 because that would bang on be average. But we can that's fine. We can understand. And look, fingers crossed for his sake, he uses this opportunity during the break to really focus on his game and come back, get a chance, and be a difference maker. Because again, at the heart of it all is a talented footballer, and all footballers have a tough patch. So, and at a club like Chelsea, it probably gets highlighted more often than not because it's a cutthroat environment. But I don't think the light's forever dimmed on him just yet. That time will tell. Another player who, for me, and I don't want to touch on him too much, and I won't want to give him a rating, but I think it's just worth highlighting, is Christian Pulisic as well. He's been a victim of his unavailability. Again, bringing in a Matisse, and its availability is your best asset at times, is your best ability, he likes to say. So, look, it's been disappointing because he's someone that has unfortunately been restricted a lot due to his consistent injuries. And we know that when he's fully fit, even though he hasn't really been as effective as he was at the back end of 2019-2020 campaign, he's someone as a direct dribbler. He's someone that he can get on the score sheet for us and be a positive contributor. So, look, I just wanted to add a couple of comments in on Pulisic because he's another one of those players that if we can get back again from the injury sidelines and have another option on the bench, he's someone that can really add a different point to our attack as well. So just did you have any quick high-level thoughts on Pulisic?
Yeah, I think the big part of it is just injuries because it seems similar with Ziyech. It seems like when they start to get started, like right when they start hitting their heights, there seems to be something that just stops them, and it's injuries. And we've all been clamoring to see. Yeah, there we go. I think we've all been hoping to see Project Restart Pulisic from the time that from the time that happened. We all thought that he was about to hit the ground running, and then another injury, FA Cup final, another injury hits, and it's been stop-start ever since then. And there's no denying there's a talented footballer in there. It's just like Ziyech in that way. That there's a very talented footballer, and as an American, I want nothing more than to see that, but I need to be objective in the sense that, if he's not going to be available at a club like Chelsea, they won't be afraid to find somebody that is. And that's not me going after Christian because I'm a big fan of Christian's. Actually, I think he's just an immensely talented footballer. And what I love about him is the fact that he's an option on our side that is direct. We don't have always a lot of players that are willing to take on players one-on-one and try to make things happen. And that's something I think that he brings to the side when he's available. But the problem is there's too many times that he's not available. And we can hope and pray that he, can get over these injury problems as he continues to get older, but it's got to be proven on the pitch like everyone else.
Absolutely. We'll see. Fingers crossed for him, because again, we've got some depth there. We just need him to be available, unfortunately. So we'll just have to see. But a player that has been available but hasn't, in my opinion, is failed to live up to the heights that I was expecting. But it's not a write-off, so to speak, by any means. It's just that we've got so much raps on him and what he can do in terms of the potential that's been built to this particular player. But Kai Havertz, I think he's someone where he was starting to really hit the ground running and find his feet, particularly in the back end of last campaign. And he started off quite strongly, then the international break happened, and then it's been quite inconsistent from him there on in. I think he's someone where perhaps he could be a little bit of a victim of this consistently changing front three and maybe those behind him, and there's this bit of lack of chemistry. But there's also a little bit of himself just failing to take the game by the scruff of the neck and really take some ownership of his role and being a positive contributor. What are your thoughts on Havertz at the moment?
Oh, a guy that you just hope you're going to see the best of. And I agree with you. And I don't think we've seen, I think he's regressed, from the Champions League final last season in terms of current form. I don't mean regressed in terms of quality, because, what do they always say? Like, form is temporary, class is permanent. No one's going to deny that Kai Havertz is an immensely gifted footballer, and I still think he's going to be one of the best players in the world. I still believe that. But going on current form, he's not hit the heights that we know he can hit. And like you said, I think part of that is just the chopping and changing in that front three. And he's still young, just like, Almighty Blues FC said. But when you come with a 72 million pound price tag, the reality is people are going to start expecting to see more goals from you, more contributions, more assists, more goals, and quite frankly, better performances, and better performances more consistently, I think, is a better way to say it. He's had good performances, but I think we just need to see that on a more consistent basis. The way he glides around the pitch is amazing. I mean, he can glide with the ball, and it looks like he makes it look effortless. It's amazing when he's at his best. But he's got to build more of a rapport and with Lukaku. We've got to see something that, we got to see that, the kind of chemistry that I think Mason Mount and Mateo Kovacic have had with Lukaku. We need to, we hope to see that in Timo Werner, in Kai Havertz, in Hakim Ziyech, and Christian Pulisic, with the rest of the attack, because that's when I think we're going to see this attack get to its best. So, I still believe that Kai Havertz can be better. I think his trajectory is, it's kind of even at the moment, but I think he can be better. I really do believe that, and I've not. Call me hopeful, but I really believe that we will see a better version of him. But it's kind of like what I would say about another player we'll probably bring up, is that the time, the clock is ticking, and at some point you have to deliver. And there's only so long that you can say I'm adapting to the league. And but like I said, in the Champions League final, he showed what he can do, and I just know that player's in there. I firmly believe that.
No, I agree. Another player that I've actually been slowly becoming more, not impressed with, but someone that's starting to show a lot more positive signs. And it's not a dramatic change in the way that they play, but I think the contribution continues to be consistent, and his overall value adding to the squad is Timo Werner. I think he's been getting on the score sheet a bit more frequently of late. He did have that strangely disallowed goal against the Saints the other day for that foul that happened 45 years ago. But unfortunately for him, it is what it is. But overall, he's been quite strong. I've really been happy with when he has been called upon. I feel like he's someone that's going to add value to our team, because he's the designated space creator of our squad. And I feel that despite his substandard finishing at times, because he's not known for his efficiency, the fact that he creates the sheer volume and really stretches defenders and creates opportunities for others is a net gain overall of his contribution to the team, which for me, I look at it as a team sport. It's you're creating a net gain. That's the most important thing. Yes, he's a striker. We want more goals. That's what we pay him for. But he also adds assists as well, which is a direct goal contribution. So for me, look, I don't think he's someone that is our regular starting front three. I'll put it out there on the table. But I'm someone that is more than happy that he plays regularly, whether or not it's starting or coming from the bench, because again, he's someone that overall adds a lot of value to the squad. But what do you think about Timo Werner?
One thing I love about Timo, and I've seen it brought up in the chat, his work rate. You never see, even when he's struggling in front of goal, one thing you can always depend on with Timo is that he's always going to work hard. He's running back and forth. He's trying to put in. Good point about good point by George about the goals chalked out by VAR, and that can be frustrating. And but I think that I like what he brings to the team in terms of he drives to the line. He works hard. I'm glad to see 2 goals recently, but I would agree with Nick. I'd say probably a 7, but he frustrates me at times. I won't lie about that. Like sometimes when he has a chance and he has a chance to put it away, I'm like Timo, but at the same time, I just can't help but love him, and I love the way the supporters get behind him, and are doing their Timo chants, and I think you brought up a great point about his assists. Like what do you have last season? Like 13 assists, if I remember right. Something along those lines.
Something like that.
Yeah, but if you look at among the league leaders, I mean, guys that are paid to get assists, those are the kind of numbers that those guys get. And so his contributions to the play, I have a lot more time for Timo because like Fal said, he gives his all, and he works his socks off every single match, and no matter whether you put him on for 30 minutes or for 90 minutes, he's going to give it everything he has. And more often than not, he's going to contribute in some way. It may not always be with a goal, but it's going to be with, a key pass that leads to an assist. It could be an assist himself. But yeah, I think that he's an important player to the team. And I think sometimes, sometimes his contributions go overlooked.
I agree. Fair call and fair rating. Now, someone here, our player of the season, played the assist, obviously, for the Champions League final. Mason Mount, look, again, I'm going to put this straight on the table. One of the players that I have huge admiration and praise for, and I think he's going to be an absolutely vital member of our squad for many, many years. I feel like, based on his own supremely high standards, he hasn't quite reached it just yet. I feel that some of that, again, is probably partially attributed to the change that are happening around him, but some of it could also just be a little bit of rustiness and possibly a bit of fatigue, because he's had also quite a busy Euros campaign and was obviously a regular 90-minute player each week. So overall, Mason Mount, to me, I know he's another player to devise the fan base at the time, but I don't buy into it. I've got nothing but high praise and admiration for him. Overall, still think he's been a largely positive contributor, and people talk about open plays and assists. I know Alex Goldberg brought up the stat with him creating the most open play chances, and that just to sort of continue to back Mace. But it's interesting that despite not playing up to here, like we know he has been for the last year or so, he's still above average, in my opinion, still contributing, again, positively. And I still think that despite the Tottenham game in that first half, where he was a little bit off, and that's fair to say, we've got to be balanced here, overall, when he's on the pitch, I still feel we are a stronger outfit just because of all assets of his play. It's not what his contributions in terms of assist making or shot chance creation, etc., but it's also the counter pressing work and leading from the front and adding that extra body in the midfield in terms of dropping back. So for me, I'll put it straight out on the record. I'd say I'd give him somewhere between a 7 and 7.5, but a positive outlook, because I know and I'm confident to put this on a record. I know we're going to see Mason again reach those dizzying heights this season. What do you think, Pat?
I think you covered it really, really well, so I'll try to be quick. But I'm going to go with 7.5. But that's because I judge him to a very, very, very high standard. I agree. I think we're a much better team when he's in the side because of his intelligent pressing, because of his ability to pass. I think he has a good shot that I think kind of goes overlooked sometimes. And yeah, wow, a 6. I would say that.
Nick's on a gauntlet today.
Yeah, wow. But yeah, I'm going 7.5. I think that, like I said, like last season to me, he was like a 9.5. But yeah, this season I think it really does come down to fatigue because I think we've learned even Mason Mount can get tired. The man will never ask for a break, but I mean, maybe 7.5. Maybe there's a little bit of bias on my part. I too am a humongous Mason Mount fan. And I think that I love, like Chelsea Respector said, I love his industry. And yeah, I think that because I think it was right of Tuchel to take him out, because I think it's just that halftime sub, it seemed a little weird to do, but it's one of those things when you're not performing, anyone can be replaced at any given time. And so I think the trend is positive. I think that we're going to see the best of Mace. I really do. And
we love you, Nick. You're just being fair, man. We love your balanced opinions.
I respect what you're giving, Nick. But I would say that Mason's trend is positive because I think we're going to see the better part of him. But for right now, based on recent form, I'm going 7.5.
Yeah. Now, fair call. Look, hey, Amina, I'm not sure if you've jumped on before, but big welcome to the channel. Mm-hmm. Check us out. Give us a subscription if you'd like. But look, I think you've cut through a lot of the chase there. And I think not sure you probably weren't at the start, but that was one thing of the themes we brought up based on our performances earlier in the segment was that if we had a front three that was firing on all cylinders, we'd be in a lot better position. And it's hard to be in a better position in first place, but I think in a more complete performance perspective. So fair call there, Amina. I'm definitely someone that's advocating for in the next set of fixtures, which we're going to touch on very shortly. But the final player or the final two players in the attacking sense that I want to get your thoughts on, Pat, just to give us a quick rating is Callum Hudson-Odoi. He's that player I was referencing before when you mentioned about players taking their chances with limited minutes. Now, it's nice to see in recent times that Cho is starting to play in a more advanced attacking position, but I actually thought he had a pretty reasonably good game the other day, and I know that it drew some criticism from some parts of the fan base, but the reality was he would have got a nice assist for Timo had that goal not been chalked off, and I thought for large parts he was quite good. And I think if he does get a run of games, which I know Nick and the crew talked about in their pod with Adam, then we might be able to give him a more fairer assessment as to what his progress is really like and whether or not he genuinely deserves more opportunities playing in that more natural position for him. I just feel for Thomas Tuchel as well that he's got a large number of attacking players he needs to manage. And while it's easy for us to say, just give him a run of games in that position, see how he goes, if he doesn't perform and subsequently the team doesn't get the results, then it's his head on the chopping block. So I definitely can sympathise with where Tuchel needs to think about his job first and foremost. And unfortunately, some players like Cho are casualties of that. But overall, I'm given the fact that the rest of our attackers haven't been knocking the ball out of the park, I think he is someone that should get a few more runs in that attacking left-hand side, and fingers crossed he delivers like Loftus-Cheek. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that I'm in two minds about Cho at the moment. I love him. I love him as a footballer, and I think that I have to take into account the fact that some of his opportunities have come obviously at the right wing back position, which is obviously not. Thomas Tuchel said himself that's not his favorite position, or where he's strongest. That's not where you get the best out of him, I don't think. But the game that I did see him at left wing, I saw what I've been wanting to see from him. He's taking players on. I saw a couple times in that game he took players on one-on-one, and that's when he's at his best because he can still do it to me. And when he attacks the line, when he attacks players, I think sometimes too many times this season, when he has the ball, he slows it down and he doesn't take on the defenders. He just goes for a quick, easy side pass when he has the ability to be dynamic and actually make something happen because he has that ability. So based on that, I'm going to go 6.5. And but I agree.
Fair.
I think he needs more opportunities out at that, left wing position because I believe was it Amina said it that there's been no number 10 that's really covered themselves in glory. So I think
I agree.
I think that he deserves another opportunity.
Yep, no, fair call, and I think we're all in general consensus of that. I thought we were operating in a league of shadows there, Pat, but I think for us, the last...
Sorry about that.
No, not at all. We've been powering for an hour 40, and I was only going to borrow Pat for an hour or so, but he's graciously given us heaps of his time, and the sunlight's already back here in sunny Sydney. So for us, the last attacking player to give a quick assessment and outlook on is Big Romelu Lukaku. There's been lots of conjecture in the media. Have we been utilising him properly? Has he failed to deliver on the big money signing that we thought we were going to get? I'll kick things off. I don't think there's any alarm bells or anything to be worried about. I understand what people are saying, that when you spend 100-odd million, you're expecting a certain output, and has he been a little bit quiet, or has he been someone that's gone a little bit missing, blah, blah, blah. But for me, I still think overall, once the caveat, once we've been able to get him involved, I still think he's someone that's so important. And I said this to Scott the other day and Miz when we were talking, is that I can't remember who was reversing against Juventus. That's right. We lost 1-0. He missed that header, and Bonucci and De Ligt gave him a hard time, but he still rounded Bonucci. And had he kept his shot on target, it's 1-1, or if he got his header, it's 1-1. And all of a sudden you've got a whole different narrative. So games are spoken about in very specific moments. So for me, Lukaku, there isn't any alarming trend. I think overall he's been quite strong, and I'm actually looking forward to post-international break, and hopefully his muscle fatigue that Martinez brought up for Belgium was just a nice way of saying that we didn't want him to get injured playing in a third-place playoff. But tell me, am I being a little bit too optimistic here? Is there a concern that Lukaku isn't maybe firing in all cylinders?
No, I think he's been overall very good, and especially like the start that he got off to. And part of it is, I would say, is that he's not getting the service that I think he needs to have. I'm not worried about him, and yeah, he's tailed off. I wouldn't say that. I'd say if you want to break up, his season into two parts, I'd say the first part of the season is much better than the second part up to this point. But and yeah, he's been quiet in a couple of games, but there's also been a few games where he's been largely invisible, but then he gets 2 or 3 chances, and then he puts 1 or 2 of them away. So, and that's mainly his job, is when he gets opportunities to do that. The problem is a lot of times we're not putting the ball into him, and I think that's part of because we're learning to we're still learning to build that chemistry with him. And that goes back to that point that the chat's brought up and you brought up about the chopping and changing at the 10 positions, is that you can't really build a chemistry with someone if you don't play with them for a run of games. And, he doesn't, we're playing a lot with him, as far as his back to goal, which he can do, but he's even said himself, that's not his favorite part of his game. He has the ability to do it, but we also need to learn that he can also, we can put the ball through or put the ball out into a channel and he can go out and get it. So it's not just a matter of, he's not strictly a guy that's only like a back to goal type player and then he plays it off to a running 10. He has the ability to run down the channel himself and make something happen. He did that plenty of times at Inter Milan, as you would very well know, being a supporter, and playing with Lautaro. But when he played with Lautaro was a lot of times more in form than he wasn't, and he hasn't really had a 10 to play off of that, it could be Timo. If Timo can get playing time. If Kai steps up, it could be anybody really, and it's just a matter of we need guys firing on this, on all cylinders at the same time, or at least, better yet, at least 50 to 60% of them at the very least, and then we'll see what Rom can do. But I think Rom is doing a great job so far. I think he's put in important goals already, and I think we're going to continue to see that from him.
I agree. And look, a lot of our rival fans will start asking questions and try to create a smokescreen and saying, "Oh, is this a player that you thought you were going to get?" and try to cause a bit of a stir up. But for me, I like the fact that we're not solely relying on him. Yes, he's a marquee signing, but we're not a one team or one player wonder like some clubs at the moment who, without their one star player, they look very average. So for me, definitely the outlook is probably stable at the moment for him, but because he's performed at such a high level, I think it's just incumbent on him to recapture that. And it's really incumbent on both Tuchel and his teammates to really make sure that they are getting him involved and getting the most out of him, on top of him going out there and finding the ball as well. So, yeah, I'm actually quite pleased with his contribution so far, and I know he can add more, and we will get more out of him, but I want the other players to also step up around him. So that brings us to the end of the player assessment. I just want to now take a quick look at the month ahead, because while it's good to take the insights from the performances that were, it's all about looking at the road ahead. So as we can see here on the screen, hopefully you can all see it, and give me a thumbs up, Pat, hopefully all good. But first up, Brentford. Now, that's going to be a tougher game than what people probably give credit for, but I'll get your thoughts in a minute, Pat. I'm just going to read them out. So we've got Brentford, Chelsea away, Chelsea, Malmo a few days later in the Champions League at home. Again, Chelsea versus Norwich at home, an EFL Cup round of 16 against the Saints at home. And then we round off the month of October away against the richest club in the world, Newcastle. So give us your high-level thoughts on that, the rest of October fixture list, Pat. To me, I'll open it up, reasonably favourable. What do you think?
I would even go with very favorable. The one that stands out to me is that Brentford away, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's coming off of an international break, and we always know the players traveling back from international duty, you don't know who's going to be available. And also, a lot of Brentford's players didn't go on international break, so they've had time to kind of train together and have time to get ready for this game. A lot of our guys have been in Nations League fixtures and other international commitments. So, but overall, very favorable, because in Champions League, having Malmo back to back gives us a real chance to stake our claim, in our group, and you want to be able to do that against the likes of Malmo. And they're there for a reason. You can't overlook them. They're in the Champions League for a reason. But then Norwich has obviously been struggling a lot defensively since they've come back up. Newcastle, near the bottom as well. We'll see what, they can't buy anything until January. So we still have that, despite being bought, they still have that same side. And we've already beaten Southampton at home, so we could do it again. But yeah, Brentford's already proven at home that they're a tough ask Liverpool. And, they've got goals in them. Ivan Toney, Mbeumo, excuse me. They've got a good side over there. And just across West London and our West London neighbors. So, yeah, I think this is a real chance, too, not only to stake our claim in our Champions League group, but also to build on our lead in at the top of the table in the Premier League.
Yeah, no, well said, and I agree. For me, at the very macro level, I look at it, Chelsea-Brentford should win, but away against Brentford, Thomas Frank's done wonders with that team, and they're not going to make it easy for us. So I think it's a bit of a blessing in disguise, is the fact that we know that they're going to be a tricky opposition, so we shouldn't, underline shouldn't, approach that game with a complacent mindset. Chelsea, Malmo, Norwich and Southampton, those games there, I see them as the real opportunities to really test our squad depth and really look at man management and look at deploying some strategic rotation there for twofold. It's obviously for fatigue and injury management, but also giving opportunities to those other players that we spoke about, like the Sauls of the world, to give players that don't get the opportunities enough, like the Hudson Odois. These are perfect opportunities. If they can't string up a good performance against some of these sides, with all due respect, because they're lesser intense than what they would be against like a Man City, etc., this is the opportunity to really trial them out and see where they're at, and it also gives the others a bit of a rest as well. So you said very favourable. I'd agree. Nick said 5 wins here. We should be aiming for that. We shouldn't shirk from our expectation and responsibility.
Yep.
But it all will come down to who's available post-international break, but also the attitude we bring towards these games and making sure that Tuchel gets the money right in terms of who his starting 11s and his rotations are. So, yeah, let's fingers crossed we continue that, because then the next month's edition, the table will look exactly the same in terms of position, because for those who don't know, Chelsea are on top of the Premier League. Like it and accept it, or if you don't, too bad, just acknowledge it. For us, the final segment of this conversation, very quickly, is on the Ballon d'Or candidates list for Chelsea. So we've got Captain Cesar Azpilicueta, the young gun player of the year for Chelsea, Mason Mount, J5, the trophy, the perennial trophy winner at the moment, the Mr. Everywhere man, N'Golo Kante, and Big Rom. So that's obviously in the men's list. The Chelsea women's have also got their Fran Kirby, Pernille Harder, Sam Kerr, Magda Eriksson, and Jessie Fleming as well, just to show the strength of the club overall, both Chelsea men and Chelsea women, both going great guns at the moment. But Pat, just to round off this very long stream from your perspective, tell us, what are our prospects of Chelsea securing a Ballon d'Or winner this season, and who is it?
Wow. I'd say out of the 5 that we have, that, obviously Messi is going to be one of the front runners, as he always seems to be. Yeah. But I think Jorginho is going to be up there in the reckoning for it. I think that N'Golo Kante could be up there just because of, history's told us those guys that win the European awards tend to be among the final, not just among the top 30 finalists, but usually among the top 3, 4. So I think we might see Jorginho in there, especially being the UEFA Men's Player of the Year, and with how many trophies he's won. Of the 5 that we have, I think that the most likely winner would be maybe Jorginho, or N'Golo Kante, but Messi's always in there, and for some, the UEFA FIFA loves Messi. I mean, they just do. To me, it's no secret that why Messi and Ronaldo have, deservedly so in most cases, but there's been a few years in there, obviously Modric winning once, and, they'd had it last year. I think Lewandowski would have won, but
great.
Yeah, but I think if we're to see a Chelsea winner of the Ballon d'Or, I think it's probably going to be either Jorginho or N'Golo Kante. But also shout out to the Chelsea women to have. I think we've got a shout there as well with the likes of Fran Kirby, Sam Kerr,
my fellow Australian Sam Kerr. We're gunning for her.
Yes, I mean, so we've got, we have a chance of having a Chelsea women's winner as well. We can't forget that. I'm glad you mentioned them. So it's it says a lot about Chelsea as a club that of the 60, of the 60 finalists between the men and women, 1/6 of those are Chelsea players. So so what do we have? 10, did I do my fractions right? 10 out of 60.
16.66 repeated percent, something like that.
I've never been great at math, but to have 10 out of the 60 players be Chelsea players says a lot about our club. Says a lot about, thankful to Roman Abramovich for the investment, and our academy for, producing some of the talent. And just really, really excited.
Yeah, now well said. For me, I get often criticised with Robin Scott about sitting on the fence. And look, I'd have to agree with him on this case. It's really difficult to call out a winner. Jorginho is probably in terms of his influence overall, but N'Golo Kante in terms of his big game performances, man of the match semi-finals of both legs of the Champions League finals also. So to get back-to-back man of the match performances in such a high octane arena, is unbelievable. So hopefully one of our players wins it. It would be phenomenal, but I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to Lionel Messi or even Lewandowski again as a way of saying sorry for cancelling last season. But overall, it'll be quite interesting to see how we go. George, I just wanted to highlight your comment before. We are going to talk Newcastle on our stream tomorrow night, so check it out. But I just want to give a sincere thank you to Pat for your time. 2-hour stream. It's been a monster effort. I've been looking forward to this for some time now to talk purely Chelsea, because for those who don't know, the show is predominantly made up of 3 fans, myself as a Chelsea fan, Rob as United, Scott as the Arsenal man. We get together, talk all things Premier League and above. But for us, this is a trial to talk about Chelsea specifically on a monthly basis. And based on this conversation, I've gotten so much out of it. And I hope you've enjoyed yourself, Pat, and the same with the live audience, because it's been a fantastic discussion. Pat, any final words before we look to plug this one away?
Yeah. First of all, RJ, to you, thank you for having me on, and thank you to the live chat. They've been phenomenal, and honestly, thank you for your patience with me, as I'm a bit long-winded with some of my answers sometimes, and I always have a lot to say, and so appreciate you, Nick, and I appreciate all the live chat for sticking with us and sticking in for however long you could. And, it means a lot, I know, to RJ, and, it means a lot to me as well. And thank you for sharing. Thank you to you and to Scott and to Rob for, sharing this, being so generous with your platform to let someone like me come on and just talk incessantly about Chelsea, in this case, for almost 2 hours. So I really, really enjoyed it, and really hope the chat enjoyed it, and hope we get to do this again.
Absolutely. And I appreciate your time again. And I think the crowd I think you need to give them what they paid their money for. We need to sign off with your famous tagline, and we'll plug it from there.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining, and come on, you Blues.
Take care, guys.